This is the biggest deer I've got. He's actually my first buck with a bow. I think it ended up being 4 does standing up there, and I could see another back coming up. When he raised his head up, my exact words, I wished I had a rifle right now. Man, he cuts a doe out of the bunch, just like you'd say a cutting horse would do a calf. Runs right down to me within 20, 25 yards. When he got down there to her, I drew back on him, and man, I ended up spining this deer. I put another one in him. Believe it or not, this deer gets up, and he falls, gets up, falls. He makes it off this food plot, get on the blood trail, and then he like cuts it off. And I knew about a bluff gap. We go in that direction, and we walk up on him. It's actually my largest bow kill, I think 162 and 8.
We're in Alabama. Heard a big buck killer lives here. I'm gonna knock and see who it is.
Come on in, my name's Jamie McCay. Welcome to my Whitetail Cribs. Welcome to my Whitetail Crib. This is my collection of whitetail, all from Alabama, most of them from public land. Only I think 3 in here is from private or club land. I'll start with this in here. It's public land with a rifle. It was a really tough year. I think it was like all the way up into December. I think it was the last hunt on this piece of public. Bounced around, wasn't doing no good in one of the honey holes, I call it. So I'll go up on a ridge system, and as I'm going in, I have deer starting to blow. I don't know about other places, but I've learned going in, just because a deer's blowing, it's not going to detour me from going in there, because it's actually a buck in the dark, either bedding with a doe, but he's harassing her, and she's blowing at him, not you. Because I killed another buck, had done that in the dark and hung out, and after it got good light, he'd come chasing her through there. I stop, I cut my headlamp off for a minute, I stand there, and I said, I'm going up, and I'm gonna find my tree and get climbed. So I climb up. I'm sitting there, and I'm facing the top of the ridge, and it's kind of thick, and it's got a transition line on top. It learned me to focus, I'll do like everybody else. I'll play on a phone from time to time, but this day I was really, really focused on this transition line because I picked up movement. It happened to be a doe. She comes out, she's browsing on the acorns right there on it, and I'm watching her, and then, I don't know, here in a minute, as she feeds around the top of the ridge, I see more movement. I scope it, another doe. So I'm sitting there, boy, I'm scanning hard, and I think at the time I hadn't even shot a buck that season. So I'm looking really, really close, and finally I see some more movement. When I scope him, I see it's him. I got to pick out me a hole to shoot him in, and how I do it, I don't know, because I've done it multiple times. I can drop down in the bottom of that summit to prop that rifle up. I'll be on my knees in the bottom of the summit so I can get as steady as I can on that rail. Anyway, I pick me a hole out, I pull the trigger, and he don't go far and piles up, but that was a good hunt there. And then this deer here, it was a year that we had 0 acres, a drought that year, so our browse died quick. On some of our public land, well, all of state Alabama public land now, you check in and out by your phone instead of getting a daily permit. So I was able to keep up how many days I've been hunting already. And it was tough. I let one deer go earlier around Thanksgiving that I kind of regret a little bit, but anyway, I think I was like 34 hunts in. This is morning and evening. Them are days. Because I'll save all my vacation to hunt. I work 4 10s and I mix it in hard. I went over to another area and I killed a smaller 8 that Friday before. It was actually my furthest shot I ever made. I was hunting in a new cutover. I still want to go back and range it before it gets too thick, but by all necks, trying to get to the white oak I was at to where I think the deer was, it was right at 290, almost 300 yards. Took a little bit that night getting him out, and my buddy, the one I said I scout with and hunt with when we get a chance, when I go out, I see his fog lights are on. I said, man, I hope that's Elston. Get up there, and it was, and he helps me get the deer out. So it's pretty late, and he says, you want to go with me in the morning? I had another place I wanted to try, but I says, you got the boys this weekend? He says, yeah. So that'd be our only day me and him could hunt. And I said, all right, I'll go with you. Because he had seen a really big deer over there. So as we're going in, he says, let me see your phone. We looking at it. He's trying to explain on Onyx where to go. So he drops a pin, and it's roughly 2 miles in, and I get in there, and I'm in the dark in the moonlight. I'd cut my headlamp off. I'm looking around the ridge top. I'm looking at my phone, and I go around, and I ain't got a clue where I'm at. And as it's breaking light, I go over the top of the ridge, And I said, well, it kind of looks like a draw right here. I said, I'm finna find me a tree. So I put out, and I'm not a big scent guy either, but that year I was playing with some scent a little bit. That's really good. I think it's native scent that's here in Alabama. I pour the whole ball out. I put out a couple cotton balls or whatever, and I just end up pouring it all out, go back over and climb. I'm sitting there, I'll blind call, I'll grunt, I'll can call behind it. Might even do aggressive buck roar. I look up and this deer's coming through, and I shoot him, and that's with a rifle. It was a pretty tough drag out of this area. It's, like I said, it's about 2 miles, but a lot of down trees and a lot of small saplings. This 10-point here, it's public. It was in December, the rut. That particular area there, I've got it figured out about the first week of December is a good week to be in there hunting. And on that particular hunt there that morning, I had, it was a group of bucks chasing one doe. They was about a ridge over from me, and I hit the can call several times. And I guess an hour later, undoubtedly he must have heard it. He come up the draw about an hour later up there to me, and he was actually within bow range when I shot him, but turned out to be a really, really, really nice buck. Had no history with him or nothing, but I think I do run a camera in that area. I just didn't at that time, and now I don't run one no more because I've backed off on a lot of the camera running now. And the next deer, it was on a hunting club we was in, and the rut in that area is about mid-January, and it was a rifle hunt. It was one of them days that you really don't care if you're hunting or not. I was with my father-in-law, and I picked out a spot, and if anybody knows hunting clubs, I was trying to figure out where I felt like nobody has been. So I got in there at evening, and I don't mind sleeping in the tree. And I woke up, it was about an hour left before dark, and I'm sitting there. And the reason I picked the tree I did, it was a good trail run up through there, and right there at the mouth of a holler with 2 points coming down. He come in that evening. I got him with a rifle. The next deer, it is a public land deer with a bow. It was in 2001. That particular deer there, it was on a Wednesday. I was going in. It's a long hike in there. It's like roughly 3 miles, and I forgot it was Wednesday night. And I was about halfway. I was like, man, it's church night. I said, but I'm gonna go on in here anyway. Well, this deer come around through there cruising that evening, and I seen him and seen how he went. Had me encounter, and I decided to climb down. I left. I said, I'll be back in the morning. So I called several people to see if I'd go on and go back in with me the next morning bow hunting. And my brother, he decided to go with me. And we decided at 10 o'clock we're gonna climb down. And I had 2 does come around the trail that morning. And at 10 o'clock, he was cold trailing that trail. And man, I'd climbed in the tree. He'd walked beside the evening before. I'd swapped and done that. Man, he turned right on a dime and was coming straight to me. When he got in the bottom, I stuck him, and that is the only deer I've shot with a bow that I've actually seen drop. He run 30, 40 yards, done the side-to-side sway and fell. That is the only bow harvest I've had to do that. It's pretty awesome when that does happen. The next deer, it's a club deer. And it's one of the areas that has a January rut, and that club there I'd figured out you need to be there right there at New Year's, first of the year. And I'd found some big rubs, and that particular year there, I had a lifelong friend that got in the club with me, and we'd hunt, and he killed a good 8, and I killed an 8 that same morning. We celebrated real good, and you could kindly tell that even though, he killed a nice deer, and I was picking the vibe up that maybe he wished I'd have killed him instead of him, because I can't remember if he was in it with me that year or he was with me as a guest, and the following year he got in with me. But anyway, I told him, don't worry about it. I found me one. Man, he was hitting some big old trees, and I'd got in there on him, and it took about 3 days to shoot. The first day I was in there, he walked down the ridge and turned and went back up. I think about 11 or so, I had a sure enough stud come down through there, and my mistake, this is years ago, I decided to take that can call, put behind my back. When I hit it, that deer left out running. And when I say rib cage, he had a rib cage on him. And I went back in the next day hunting the transition line. I think it was him come in, just kept blowing, stomping. The following day, I'd made a move, took 4 days, my bad. I went further down to try to keep my wind from going up in the pine thicket. I had a spike come down. Man, he eyeballed that level and he picked me out. And I was like, well, I'm done in this area for a couple of days, let it cool down. Well, my brother had called me that night and he says, well, we normally hunt together on New Year's Day. And I think it was in the single digits, I think. It was one of them unusual cold fronts that come through Alabama. I was like, well, there ain't one place I know to go where we can both fit, and I know the bucks are coming through. So I went back, climbed in that tree. The first tree he had bust me in, but I turned my tree, staying in the tree with the transition because he was coming down the transition line, and the tree helped block me. And I felt like, I was like, man, I was looking at my watch that morning. I was like, well, he's going to come in it's getting close to that time. And I happened to look behind me and that deer was standing there. Man, I was easing them gloves off. I don't like to shoot with gloves on and try to ease up a tree and get turned around. And anyway, I got him, I shot him. He run off, put another in him, he dropped. And I didn't want to mess my brother up, so I left, went, got my cart, took the deer to the truck, and he seen 2 or 3 bucks that morning. I think he got down and used the bathroom on that particular hunt, and one seen him and run off. The next deer in the corner, that chocolate horn 8, it was a public land rifle hunt. I don't like hunting the creek bottoms on the gun hunts, but this was a point that led up on a different ridge system, and the creek actually forked. I felt like I had a good chance right there, and I'd put a camera in there for a week, and when I went in that morning to climb, I'd pulled that card, and when I got up in the tree, I looked, I had one deer to come through early in the week. It just run through. Well, this deer here, I'd climbed a forked tree, and I was pretty high up. I was like, man, I can hear a deer walking, but I was facing the tree in front of me and it's in line on the point. But anyway, long story short, I look around the tree and I can see this deer walking, closing. It was a scrape over from me. I don't know. It wasn't but 20, 25 yards. And he'd got in so close, I didn't know. He looks good, but I don't know if he looks good enough to shoot down off in this deep hole. And I got it nicknamed The Hole, if that gives you any kind of reference how rough it is. Anyway, I shot him, dropped him. You could take pictures of the tree. I was able to get him out by myself. And once I made it up to the top shelf, then you still had to go up a draw to get on top of the bluff. And it took a good part of the morning. But once I got up there, it was like, I done got on up in my age a little bit, and I felt like it was a major accomplishment. I felt good that I was able to get the deer up by myself without asking for help. And the next deer, it's a public land deer, and I found him on camera. I'd hunted that spot for several years, and I had it called the killing tree because I've killed several deer out of that tree, but that in particular buck there, I kept getting him on camera in Velvet. After Velvet come off, he disappeared, never seen him. So I think probably the second year, and I think I killed him on the third, I said, man, I'm on strike out. I got to find his sheds. I feel like on this big ridge system somewhere. So after season, I went in, I walked it all out, and I come around and I found the shed from the year before, not that year's shed. So I'd done been walking for quite a while. So I come home, and as I was leaving, I said, man, I believe that thicket up there, this year's shed is sitting in it. And I went back and looked, and it was one of them years we had a really wet winter, so none of the underbrush or browse line was gone. It was still there. I'd walk down in it. It was about chest high, and I found a giant bed, and I was like, well, I feel like this deer, he's very smart. During that time, I found some of the hoof prints, how he was coming around and coming up the point. I didn't have no luck that year finding that year's shed, but leading into the season, I'd put a camera on top of the bluff, hoping to get his picture since I'd found his sheds up there. And leading into a gun hunt, I went to check it, and I had a small 8. And I called my brother, and I said, have you found you a spot to hunt on this early hunt? He's like, no. Well, you can hunt that over on top of the bluff. I said, when I went down and checked my card, I seen that, and I went scouting some more, and I found some really, really big rubs. And I was walking the creek system down up a good hollow, and all the buck sign like you just cut it off. I was like, this deer just didn't quit making all his signs. So I hit the bluff wall itself, just rock wall, probably 20, 30 foot high. And I'm walking around, and then I walked right up on a shelf that I know it wasn't man-made, but it was a nice shelf that you could go up, and it was wore out in tracks. Got on top of the bluff and scraped right there. I said, okay, I'm hunting here. So that's when I called him and told him about the other spot. So leading into that gun hunt, I hunted on the bluff line, and he hunted over there. But when I was up there showing it, it to him where to climb at. I turned around and looked, and I found the year before shed, the shed that I was looking for. And that's actually the shed on the barrel. That hunt there, I had several guys walk to the edge of the bluff. I whistled them off, and then I got down early because I felt like if I was going to get a push, I would have already got it off that gap. So I went to the truck, and he had to work that night. So I went up there. He explained to me he heard some deer that morning. And so I got in that tree, and I'm sitting there, and I'm studying. I said, well, if they ain't coming around this point, they cutting this point off and falling the bluff line around. So I picked me a tree out, and that next morning I went back in the dark, found it. I'm sitting there. I could hear the deer coming. I could barely see the ground, and I'm straining my eyes to see. And I bumped the pine tree with my elbow, and man, this deer turned inside out. And when he stopped running to the other ridge, that's when he blew. So the following weekend, I was on another big deer on the opposite side that was open. That side was open too, but it was the first time they ever done it. They ain't done it since. They had both sides open on the opening weekend. So I'm over hunting this one big deer, and I done went in. It's a haul to get in there. Probably just take you an hour to get in there. Well, the whole time I'm sitting in the tree, everything in me saying I need to climb down and go on the other side of the mountain and hunt this deer. Well, I fought that half the morning. I finally give up and climbed down, and on the way out, it's straight up. Man, I poured sweat, and I carry a Summit. I hunt out of a Summit with all my gear and got out, made it over, got to the other place, eat lunch in the truck, climbed, got up on top of the bluff and climbed, and I think it was a little after 4. Wind been humming all evening. I happened to look in the draw, and I seen him walking down. Ended up killing him in the tree I'd picked out and climbed. Where I shot him at, I could see where I shot him, and the shed I found on top of the bluff, and then the bluff line on over. I could see all three of where I found both sheds, and then where I killed the deer, I could see it all from one tree. The next deer, it is actually the biggest rifle kill I've got. He's in the you might say 140. He's like 139 some change. And I'd had one picture the season before of him. I didn't see it till season was over, I think, when I checked it. And he come through like December, and everything's done by then unless you want to bow hunt. So I'd put some cameras out the following year, just spaced them out in different areas. I had one, I think, up there. I'm not sure. But I'd found out that area is I'd hunted it for years, but I was going past it. And it was a bench that come around, and it was a point that run down, and the does really liked hanging there a lot. I'd made a surprise hunt in there. I said, I'm gonna stop right here and hunt. I have to tell you this deer over here. Let me stop on this deer and jump to this in here, because he is the one that I killed when I went in there the first time and stopped on the bench. This one here is the reason I went in there. And the first time I went in and hunted the bench, probably the best weekend in state of Alabama I've ever had. Never experienced it before. Probably, I hope I will, because we got a three buck limit in the state of Alabama, and I could have filled my buck tags in one weekend. The rut was on, and everything, all the stars lined up. So I got in there and climbed on that bench, and I had deer in the dark chasing some does around. I had a 7-point I had on camera for several years, and he was a big deer. He come around, and I grunted at him, and he went on. I'm sitting up in the tree, and like I said, it's been a lot of deer cutting through that morning. It was a 9-point that I had pictures of that year. He come pushing 2 does up. The 7-point had done disappeared. And the 9-point, and when he pushed them does up, I heard something running. He come running over in front of me, and man, I'm scrambling hard up there with my phone to get. I thought I could pick them up really good with my camera for footage. But when the 9-point come up, you know, Alabama, we just don't see what a lot of the Midwest see. And watching your hunting shows, he come up there twisted sideways, and him and the 7-point locked up, and they fought. The 7-point was bigger in body, but I guess the 9-point had more grit. He whooped him. So the 9-point come over a little rise in the ridge, and the does was in a draw over here, because I had scoped him. I said, oh, it's at 9. I'm going to shoot him. I said, no worries. I had no shot when he's coming across. I said, but them does are right here. I'm gonna end up getting him right there in that draw. Well, anyway, that little slight breeze, he locks up. He just raises his flag, never blows, does nothing, and bounced out of there. Well, the 7-point got his bearings to him, and I just cut my phone off. He snorted, wheezed, and I was like, man, I could have got that on, at least the audio. Camera ain't too good on my cell phone. He come up through there, and when he got to where the 9-point was at, he'd stopped, froze in his tracks. I was like, man, he's finna bounce out. But then he wasn't looking at me. He was like looking through me, and I happened to cut my eyes, and it's 3 does had come up. Anyway, once he focused on them, he settled down, eased in, and they walked off together. And I sat from daylight to dark, and I debated on moving trees, and I was like, well, if I'd wanted to shoot them, I could have shot them all from this tree not to move. So I stayed, and the next morning, I think I heard some deer in the dark come up through there, and then it was nothing. I was like, man, yesterday morning, this place was just being wore out by deer. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I hear a grunt, and I go to looking around. A doe was walking in, and I was looking. I was like, man, am I sure it was a doe? I had to scope her head because of the grunt. I said, okay, it is a doe. Well, then I heard something coming from the other direction. It ended up being like a 3-point or something. I'm sitting there studying it all out. Then I hear on top of the ridge, whipping and breaking. He come running down. She runs by me, and he slows down just enough, and I shot him with my rifle and got him. And now we can back up and go back to this, and because it's the same area. And what got me in there on them is because the does like to travel through there. So when the rut's on, I'll pop in and out, but that particular week, I like to get in that one area. That morning was pretty quiet. I had a doe and a yearling come up, and they was feeding acorns and made on a few trees right in there. She was feeding pretty good, and all of a sudden, the wind must swirled. She left out. I done videoed her with my phone for a little bit. I'm standing up, stretching, and I have a doe run right by the tree, and I'm watching her. I turn, watch her run. I was like, I wonder if she's being chased by a buck. And then, man, he come through. He's just grunting and bellowing. And I've never hollered at one to stop, and it took 3. The last yell was loud. I mean, I got pretty hysterical with it, and he locked up, and I shot him, even though he run out there about 100 yards, and I shot him again. Before I got down, I had 2 more bucks cold trailing come up to where grunting. And she's blowing and running and makes a loop. I get down and I go to look, and in my mind, he runs straight. And I spent about an hour looking. I said, there's no way I missed this deer. So I said, I'm gonna call a dog in tonight because they can't come on public land until it gets dark. I'm walking around, I made a big loop, and I was like, man, if he got back on this doe, I'm gonna be upset. So I make a big loop in there, how they had run chasing that doe. And I come back over the ridge, and I said, well, there's some beetle timber right there. I just wonder, he hung a right. And where I'd kept going straight, I was standing there, and I said, there lays my deer. And then he didn't go from the last impact shot, maybe 50 yards. I was so focused, convinced he run straight. But this deer here was actually my first deer I'd ever mounted. I think it was in 95. Where we live, they closed it down for 6 years to do a restock, and it was actually the first hunt. And you can imagine having an area of public land shut down for that long, how many people's gonna be out on your opening of a restock and letting the deer alone for 6 years. And it was people everywhere hunting that day. But I'd done my scouting, found where it looked like it was going into a cutover. I was crossing a paved road going into a fresh cut. So I'd picked out the holler next to it. That morning, like I said, it was people everywhere. It's shooting going on. This deer here run a transition line down, entered in where I was at in the woods, and all I could see was that one side, and I shot him. I was very excited. I threw everything out of the tree but my rifle, and I had to contain myself from doing that. Flashlight, everything went out the tree, and got over there, and as I'm approaching the deer, all I could see was one side sticking out of the leaves, and I was like, man, he ain't got but one side. But when I grabbed him antlers and pulled it up to look at him, it uncovered, and man, I was very, very happy. The next deer is on public land with a rifle. I went in, done my scouting. It's a trail that I've always checked out. They always lay sign on it. And what got me on it, we was always going to the back a long ways in. It's 3 miles in just to get to it. Well, on these gun hunts, I kept noticing these tracks crossing the road. And it took a couple of years for me to go in there and investigate it. So anyway, I noticed the rub in there. So I done a lot of walking, found my trail. And I had a buddy from work. I said, man, you want to go with me? And we left work one day to go scout because I had him a spot picked out, but I wanted to make sure he found it. I had him night tags. We walked in, showed it to him. I said, if somebody happens to be in here, go to the top of the ridge and you can hang a left and go out there and climb. So anyway, that morning there, we'd made it in almost to where we was going to split up, and another guy met up with us, and we're talking and walking. He found out we had some radios with us and asked what channel, you mind if I jabber with y'all during the day? I said, nah, you're good. And as we're walking, I said, well, I'm finna break back to the right up here, and Andy's going to break back I'm gonna be on the left. Andy's gonna break to the right. That guy said, well, I got a stand, I think, maybe down on the right. We talked. I said, there's some really big rubs and some grass in there and green grass mixed in with it. He said, yeah, that's it. My buddy was like, man, that looked, later that day, he said, he looked like he followed the night tags you'd put in. But when you start hunting public land, we all know how to hunt. We all look for sign. This guy probably had him nailed down too. So anyway, Andy went on up to the second spot I had picked for him. And that morning I had a doe and I think maybe a half rack come through. I had 3 deer come off a point beside me. I didn't get a good look at them, but I know they was headed toward Andy. Right at 10 o'clock, he come in cold trailing where that doe had come through that morning and got him. And then it was roughly 2 miles to get him out. I've got several horror stories getting deer out. This next deer, he is actually one of them I killed this year. He's not a high-scoring deer. I think I roughed him in at 125 and some change. I had a big bow kill in that mannequin. We'd went through a tornado in 2011. One of my big bow kills, I had him remounted after the tornado, and that was his mannequin. And I wanted to get all my bow kills, or as many as I could, on one wall to get them together. So I decided to pull the horns out and anyway, hydrated the hide back and stuck his antlers in there. But that deer, it was a good ways in, but it was on public land. And I caught movement coming off a ridge over from him. And it was almost like he knew the does was in the area because, man, he come down. And when he made it to that trail, he turned, was looking at him. And I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and take him. So I shot him. But that was a good drag out of there, too. Now, I actually packed that one out, cut him up and packed him out. I've got to where I'll pack a few out. I found out packing ain't fun, but the deer on the top left, that is a muzzleloader kill on public land. I'd bounced around several places. I think it was a week-long muzzleloader hunt and wasn't having no luck. And I said, well, there's some trails over on top of the bluff and it's a lot of shelves run up. And I'd climb. I'm sitting there and I got a buddy I work with. He hunts Tennessee and I actually had signal that day for some reason. We're texting back and forth. He says, I done killed this, or seen this deer, seen this. He done seen up almost 10 deer already. And I text him back. I said, man, I ain't seen nothing. And then it wasn't 15 minutes. I text him back. I got me a good, and he come down the bench, the trail, and I didn't even know it was scrape on it. I just knew they like to travel it because I run a camera on it the year before, and it's pretty steep. It's got a lot of benches going up, and give you an idea how steep. And I climbed the second bench from the top, and I climbed so high. He was walking the bench on the tree that I had climbed, and I said, I'm gonna have to shoot him here. I won't have a shot. I had to stick my arm under my summit bar, the gun over the top of the bar like this just to shoot him, to get the gun where I can even get the point of aim on him. So either I'm gonna shoot his antler off or I'm gonna shoot him between his rack into his shoulder blades. Anyway, everything hit it smart and he folded right there. The deer on the right, he's actually a set of sheds I'd found leading last summer, and wanted to hunt that deer, and I thought, well, and I'd bought that skull plate, or the plastic skull. I got some bow kills out in the shop that I felt like deserved to be in the house now. And I went out to cut one of them off, and I almost felt like I was committing a sin cutting the antlers off to do this with. So I went ahead and I said, I got these sheds, they look great. And if I can kill that deer this past season, it would be a good, thing to have, good story to tell, that I got the deer mounted here and I got his sheds on a plastic skull right beside him. But it didn't work out this year, but our acorn crop and all that wasn't great, and it had them shut down on making a lot of signs. So I'll be back to check him out this year. So maybe he'll be even bigger. I'll stick him up there this season. So now we'll get over to my bow kill wall. This one here, I'll tell you about it first before I get into the really nice ones. This was this past season. I'd hunted it a little over 3 miles in, and I got in there, and I'd watched the weather. It's supposed to have been low 40s. With a 15-mile-an-hour wind. I thought, well, thin jacket, I'll be fine. Man, I got in there that morning hunting. There's nothing cutting the wind, no ridges blocking it out of that north wind. And I got so cold, I stood up. And finally, I got the tree in between me and the wind coming in. And I was like, man, I'm finna tap out and go to the house. So I hung it out. I think I stayed in the tree, maybe 10 o'clock or so. I climbed down. And I done hunted this area a couple times already this year, and some fresh sign had popped up. I said, well, this is kind of out of the wind. I'm walking back and forth, and I finally picked me a tree out to climb. I said, this is the one I'm gonna climb. Now, if I'd have known, I was back in the tree before lunch, and if I'd have known the first deer I would have seen was like 4, I told somebody, I said, I wish I'd have climbed down, laid by the tree, and took a nap. I was that tired. I'm sitting there, and around 4, I had it was a high rack 6, and I knew it was a transit or a trail that run around through there. He liked to cruise during the rut. Anyway, he cruised it, went on, and then right before dark, I heard one coming from the opposite direction, walking the same trail, and I thought it was a doe, but that rangefinder I got's got a really good magnification on it, so I'll use it for, a semi-binocular so I can see. I throw it up, and I'm looking, and he moves his head, and I said, oh, this is a buck. But I would thought he would walk that same trail on around. I'd just say I seen a good deer today. Well, man, he come on in, and I had the scrapes. He was over in front of me, and he's real slow, very cautious. I mean, no wind from that 15, 20 mile an hour wind from that morning to nothing that evening. I'm talking about dead still. He comes up real slow, and the only thing kept him, I think, from walking straight in under the tree I was in, a tree had fell in front of me, and he walked right by the root ball, so he was roughly 7 or 8 yards. And man, when I shot this deer, he bounces out there, I don't know, 40 yards, and I can't see that far because it done got that late. This deer goes to blowing, and I'm sitting up in the tree. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm really upset with myself. I said, I'm hitting some public land I can rifle hunt tomorrow. This deer walks off. He didn't run off. So I go ahead and climb down. I find my arrow, a little bit of blood, nothing major. So I get over there to where he'd last stopped, and man, he's just painting the ground. I deserve this deer to come back tomorrow. And I videoed it, and I sent it to a couple buddies. And Tony, he was like, all right, now send me the picture of the deer. I said, I didn't follow him up. I don't want to bump him, but I got a buddy to go in with me the next morning to bow hunt. We was going to stay up in the tree about 9, 10 o'clock, then get down and look. So the next morning, we stay in the tree, almost 10. We get down, and man, and even on the shot, I says, man, I think I shot this deer through the neck. That's kind of what it looked like. We go to tracking him up, and he might have went, we got some pretty deep mountains. It ain't like out in the Midwest. You're looking at, you might find one maybe 1,000 foot in elevation. And we tracking this deer, and we go off. I call it a cove. Some people may just call it a big creek bottom. And we're dropping off, and you're walking. You ain't having to search for blood. You just walking beside it. We done went off the first bench, and I was like, well, if he makes it to the creek, I'm going to call this. I hadn't told my buddy that. And as we're getting to the second bench, I could see the deer laying down there, and I didn't tell him nothing anyway. It was, if you shoot some and they get away, then you have something like this, you let lay overnight, and you get to go find him, and you see him laying there. Hey, I'm 50-year-old, and I still get excited just like a kid. I tore out running, and I'm down there fist pumping when he makes it to me, and we quarter him up and bring him out, and he's going to be close to 3.5, 4 mile out. So now we'll move on to this bow kill here. I actually got him year before. The earliest big buck I've killed with a bow. We had an unusual cold front. I think it was the first week in October. And I had told somebody, I said, well, somebody's going to kill a good deer this weekend out of this mountain. I just didn't know it was going to be me bringing him out. I just got one of the running gun stands that year, and I didn't feel comfortable enough at the time to go in the dark and put the climbing sticks up the tree. So I wanted to do it on the evening hunt. And I've been bouncing around. I think I'd done killed a doe. We had opened up that year in September, I think maybe the 30th or 31st. So I killed a doe, and I was bouncing around, and I remember this spot here. I'd scouted, I think it was like 2 or 3 years before. It was some buck sign in the area. I said, I'm going to slide in here and check this out. Then I'm going to come back out and get my stand. I'd left the truck, and I was like, well, it's kind of crazy to go in there and it looks really good and come all the way back out, getting sweaty again. I grabbed my gear, went on in. As I'm going in, I see a lot of sign. And that year we had abundance of acorns. And I'm glad I took the little XOP stand in with me, because the white oak I picked out where everything transitioned down in the trails on this little creek. There's a giant white oak, and there's not a summit out there would go around it. Matter of fact, when I was trying to throw this Amstel to myself, I had to choke up on it just so I can get it to myself. So anyway, I get up in this big white oak, and I get settled in. Earlier in the evening, I have 3 does come down through there, and they get down in the little creek bottom. Part of it was dry, and I said, if they come on up here, I'm going to stick me one of these does. And they went up beside the ridge, and they disappeared. And then a little bit later that evening, I could hear one coming around that trail, and I'm looking. I could see one side, and I don't have binoculars. I don't take a lot of bulky stuff with me. And he's on the other ridge from me. He's busting acorns. He's feeding on those. But when I say we had really good acorns that year, they was hitting the ground and rolling down the side of the ridge and stopping on the bank. This deer here, he's feeding across from me, you know, no shot. And he turns on a dime coming to me. And he's coming down. I'm looking at his spread, and I said, I'm finna shoot this deer if he gives me a shot. He comes on in. I went back just to climb the tree to range it to make sure, because I done ranged a couple. And this is when I had the one. This is what got me away from the one pin. I thought I knew the yardage and I had it set. Well, when I released, man, it flew good. It sounded good. He run about 70 yards, and I was doing my hunting show thing up in the tree. I'm listening, waiting on him to fall, because this deer runs 70 yards and stopped. Well, I'm sitting there listening, and I'm waiting, and I hear something. I lean around that tree because it's a massive white oak, and I see this deer walking to me. And it's almost eye level. And I'm like, man, I ain't even got an arrow. So I reached down and get me another arrow. And I was fighting arrow flight that year, and we put some mini vanes. My brother's got an archery shop, and we was playing with that. I put the mini vanes with 4 on it and found out I was having bad flight, and I went back to the Blazers. Just got that done right there first of hunting season, and I hadn't even turned my fletchings on my knot. When I knocked that arrow up, I looked down, I had to turn it. Anyway, he eases up through there. I didn't know the scrape was on that point. He starts hitting the licking branch, so I had to turn 180 degrees because my lanyard's in the way, and I was thinking, man, time I get turned, this deer's going to be looking at me, because if I'm above him, I'm only a foot above him. He's still working that licking branch. I draw back, and when he walks out, I release. Man, he leaves out. I get down. I go check my arrow, put that little stand together. Arrow's got good blood on it. Go back to the truck. I got a buddy that I do a lot of scouting with. We get to hunt from time to time together, and I have signal at the truck, and I call him. He says, man, I'm on my way. I'll help you look for him. I said, all right. Well, I call my brother, tell him what all went on. And you kind of, if you're about to shot in the mully grubs, because I done shot at him once, and my brother, I said, man, I don't know. I think I may have shot him through the neck because the way it looked. We get up there, we trail him up, and sure enough, it went through his neck. He didn't go far. I mean, I told one, since I've been shooting all these deer in the neck, I said, dead is dead, but I had to make another climb in there. I said, I wanted to range where the deer was standing to make sure and to look back where I shot him at. And there's a few twigs, so maybe it hit a twig and deflected the arrow. But anyway, the first shot was in line good. It ended up, I got pictures anyway. It's a perfect triangle through the leg. So to have a shot deer with a bow to only go 70 yards and turn back and come to you, I got one buddy I always cut up with, tell him I'm lucky, but he says, man, you create your own luck. I said, hold on, let me tell you this story. So after I got done with the story, he says, okay, we're going to strike this one up as luck. Anyway, we'll get to my next, the biggest deer I've killed. This 8-point here, I got him out of what I call the killing tree, because it was really hot for years, and then it was on public land, and they done some cutting in there, so it changed the deer's activity up. Maybe they'll thicken up one day and get hot again. I hope anyway. But I'd had 1 or 2 summer pictures of this deer. I was working swing shift at the time and can't remember if that's that year I'd seen some walking a transition line from off that bluff. But anyway, I'd went in. My daughter, I swung by the hospital. She was in the hospital at the time. Seen her, and I said, well, I'm going to go on up here and hunt. I worked off that morning. When I got up in the tree, me and swing shift on nights don't work very well. I was really tired while I took a nap. Well, I woke up at 3 o'clock. I'm sitting there, and here in a little bit, I could hear something walking. I went ahead and got up, get ready, and when he broke out of the bark, and clear enough I could see him, I could see how wide he was. And the deer always walked that trail on top of the bluff. Well, this deer, when the runoff right there of the water, this deer turned and was coming straight to me. And I drew back, and all I could see was him walking straight on down in his rack. And I was like, man, I can't shoot this deer like this. So I'm at full draw. He stops at 7 yards, and I'm sitting there thinking he's going to blow and go at any minute. Here in a second, he goes back to walking, which I'll never forget it, because he raises his tail as I'm at full draw, takes a poop, or you can hear it hitting the ground. I'm still at full draw. I hold for a while. And when he starts walking, I step on the side of that summit and lean out of the tree and shot him. And I seen him when he run off a point. And when I got down, after the shot, I'm leaning out of the tree. I'm expecting I should be able to see that arrow sticking at the ground. some of it, at least the fletching's at 7 yards. I climbed down, I find it about 40. He took it 40 before it fell out. So I leave, and when I leave and come out of the mountain there, it's pouring rain. I call a buddy. He says, man, when you're ready, I'm ready to go in and look for him. I said, well, I hate to go in and push him. He's a big one. I said, we'll go back in the morning. We'll bow hunt and climb down and go look for him. Anyway, at night, I'm at the hospital. I'm doing all the Googling about gut shot, liver shot, say they go to water. Anyway, that next day we get down, I think it was 9:30. I done burnt that sleeve up enough. I finally give him a signal. We climbed down. It took a little bit and found him, got him out. But I didn't get to weigh this deer here when I killed him, but this is the only to be known weight. This is the biggest body deer I've ever killed. He dressed. Now, when I found him that morning, he'd been laying in the creek and it was really hot. So I cut the flank out of him. So that big section of meat and hair was gone, but I took him down. It was a buck contest going on. He dressed out 186, and I think 239 with the formula they got, guts and all live weight, but roughly. And I think he was 142 and 8, 130 and some change, and 120. And this is the biggest deer I've got, and he's 162 and 8. He's actually my first buck with a bow. I don't know many dates when I killed a lot of these deer, but I remember it was in 2000. I was working for a contractor back in. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and they said, we're going to knock off for the day. And I already had lined up to take some guys to another public property. It's public land also. And during that time, I think I talked to my brother, and he says, man, I had a buck chasing 2 does, and they didn't come by me. When they split, he followed the doe that didn't come by him. I said, so that got the wheels a turning. I said, man, I need to be hunting instead of taking people scouting. I explained how to get to that public land, so I hurried up and got home and tore out. It's 3 miles in. So when I get up there, there's a doe laying in the food plot, and I run her out. I mean, I got a particular place I'm wanting to go and climb, so I just blow her out of there, and I get in there and climb. Here we go, taking another nap. I'm tired, so I take a nap in the tree, and around 3 o'clock, I get up, or not get up, I wake up, and I'm looking around, I'm resting, and I'm looking around, and I'm actually hunting a trail that I found leading out. And I'm sitting there, and I look back up the ridge, and a doe popped up, walked up to the top of the hill, then another doe. Then another doe. And I think it ended up being 4 does standing up there, and I could see another back coming up. When he raised his head up, my exact words, I wished I had a rifle right now. I'm sitting there just watching him, and man, he cuts a doe out of the bunch, just like you'd say a cutting horse would do a calf. Man, she runs right down to me within 20, 25 yards. Back then, I was still early in my bow hunting career. I always heard if they could see your eyes, they gonna pick you out. So I kind of closed my eyes because she was looking up at me. And so after a while, I looked back down. She was feeding, so I leaned back and looked, and he was on my side of the field, and then broke in a full sneak trotting my way. So I didn't know what I was supposed to have to do, if I was gonna have to shoot him trotting or what. So when he got down there to her, he stopped where she was standing and watched her run back up to the group of does. And I drew back on him, shot, and man, I ended up spining this deer. And back then, I used to shoot a lot of archery tournaments and was a pretty good shot, but I guess what I had in front of me had me buck favored up. But anyway, he dropped in the field. He's all bowed up, and the does are standing up on the hill looking back down at him. And I was running the quickie quiver, small, and only held 3 arrows. So I put another one in him, and believe it or not, this deer gets up. And he gets up, falls. He makes it off this food plot, and he's painting trees as he's going. I didn't want to shoot that 3rd arrow, but, kind of wished I would have. When I climbed down, I left tree stand, bow, everything. This is public land, still plenty of daylight. I left it and come out of the mountain. When I got to my dad's house, try to tell him what went on, man, I just break down and cry. I mean, I was choked up. And after I settled down, he said, son, that deer will be there in the morning. I said, you ain't got to go, but me and some more finna round, I'm going to round them up. We going back for this deer. Because I'd heard somebody earlier in the year sticking one with a bow, left it overnight, and the coyotes just destroyed him. So I borrow our buddy Tony deer cart. It's me, my brother, brother-in-law, father-in-law, and my dad. We go back in, and Tony, he's like, well, I'll go with you if you need to help. I said, I think we got plenty. So anyway, we get back in there, get on the blood trail. And then he like cuts it off. And I get them to make in a circle trying to pick up any blood. Me and my brother-in-law had been, I've hunted the area for years anyway, prior to this bow hunt. And I knew about a bluff gap. So me and my brother-in-law said, well, I think he's headed to it. So we go in that direction and we walk up on him. But it's actually my largest bow kill, I think 162 and 8.